Welcome in San Diego. It's Jade Hindman. Today we are talking about local solutions to keep people from experiencing homelessness. This is KPBS Midday Edition, connecting our communities through conversation. Around one-third of people experiencing homelessness in San Diego County are 55 and older, and that's according to last year's point-in-time count. And older adults experiencing homelessness have specific needs that require specific solutions. One age and ability-forward solution is to keep people living in their homes in the first place, a commitment the Office of Homeless Solutions for the County of San Diego makes by providing some older residents with monthly rental subsidies. Here to talk about it is Deanna Beck. She's the director of the Office of Homeless Solutions for the County of San Diego. Deanna, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So glad to have you here. Well, I want to talk about the people you're helping with this program. In what ways are older adults especially vulnerable to experiencing homelessness?
Absolutely. So we picked this particular population because we see that that's currently the population on the rise experiencing homelessness. We base that on our local data from the point in time count. It's a population that generally is not in a position to increase their income as they're getting older. They might be experiencing health issues or disability issues and variety of factors. They may need higher level of care. And so we see them being priced out of housing. And so their income is not keeping up with the costs of local market. And so they are simply just cannot afford homes in many situations. And then any other contributing factors, such as I mentioned, health or disability and that type of issues, could create a crisis where they find themselves experiencing homelessness.
So what's the idea behind the shallow rental subsidy program for older adults? I mean, how exactly does it work?
So our shallow rental subsidy program is a pilot program, and it provides rental assistance paid directly to the landlord. So our population is obviously older adults. They have to be 55 years of age for the head of household, and they have to be spending more than 50% on their rent. They have to be so they're considered rent burden and at risk of experiencing homelessness. And the program provides them that shallow subsidy assistance of $500 per month for 18 months. They receive case management as part of the program, so to look at other options as well as the step down from the program. And they additionally have to agree to be part of our evaluation, which is also part of the program, so that our Office of Evaluation and Analytics will later look at results and be able to give us data to tell us of the success of the program.
Well, what is the current status of the shallow rental subsidy program? I mean, where are you in the process right now?
So we were able to enroll participants in a couple of rounds. So initially we were allocated amount for about 222 households, and then we were given another round of funding by our Board of Supervisors. So we were able to do a second round for 160 additional households. And so people came into the program at different times, and they will of course exit at different times as well because of the 18-month limit. So their time started when they entered the program. So we're currently sort of in the middle of the program. The application we've enrolled everyone, so the application period had closed, and so we are currently administering and working with folks, and we will see the first exits out of the program, which is for our round one participants toward the end of this year, and then the program will end in 2026 for all participants.
The shallow rental subsidy program is one example of a preventative measure to address homelessness in our region. Another example is expanding affordable housing. So, in your opinion, what needs to be done to expand preventative measures like these?
So that is an excellent example so I'll talk a little bit about our county strategic vision, which is framework for ending homelessness, which has programs along each domain. And first domain is prevention, which is the program we're talking about today, shallow subsidy. However, we know that in addressing homelessness, that's just a piece of the puzzle. So we need permanent housing, which is one of our framework's domains. So expanding that, and that's the focus of our county's housing and community development department is to increase availability of those affordable units. And we have many thousands of them currently in the pipeline. And then in between, there's programs that need to be in diversion. So when someone is really in that imminent risk of homelessness on the cliff, facing homelessness, there need to be diversion programs. Services, treatment, and outreach is another domain. So that is where people who may be experiencing, behavioral health issues or a number of other issues that can the need to get treatment to stabilize and get back into housing, and of course then emergency housing, which is a way to stabilize someone coming off the street into a shelter or another, like safe parking or camping, and then going before they can get into permanent housing. So there is all those interventions are on our county's strategy and our framework for ending homelessness. And so we have programs, over 100 programs in the county that administer services in one of those domains. And so that is, and it's all needed to be able to get ahead of this issue.
Do you have any personal stories to kind of really bring this home and help folks understand what the aging population is dealing with in terms of trying to stay in their home?
Of course, those stories are so important because they connect that. Really the heart goes out to. We had an 80-year-old that simply was living with the family, and that was no longer an option. And so they were in a rental situation and just really really struggling to make ends meet, pay the bills, pay the medications, pay the doctors, just all of that some of those extra costs, buy groceries. So oftentimes they have to make a choice between buying, medication or groceries and paying their rent. So this $500 a month really kind of goes towards that, alleviates some of that pressure, so that way they can live a better quality of life. There's so many different stories. Each story is so unique in this program, but at the same time, they all have that common need is that if they didn't have some subsidy, and if they did not have this assistance, they may very well be facing having to live in their car or on the street. And so that is heartbreaking for this population, and it's something that we obviously strive to prevent. But it's very difficult, and we know that in current housing market, the rents are skyrocketing. There's a low vacancy rate, so even people that do have income or are looking for places, it's difficult to find. One of the lowest vacancy rates in the region. And so it's just everything, a lot of things that are stacked up against folks that might have, mobility issues, or even, they may not be able to drive a car anymore, or there's just so
Mhm.
many different situations that we see through some of these clients that could impact their ability to really live be at 100% and be able to take care of themselves.
Mhm. In general, what are your reflections on the state of homelessness in 2025? I mean, we don't have the latest point in time count data, but are you noticing any trends?
So I will be cautiously optimistic. I'm encouraged by the recent numbers that Regional Task Force on Homelessness publishes. I will say that based on those numbers, in the last 3 years, we have seen the number of newly homeless, outpace those that are housed. And so it's been sort of a sobering reality. For every about 10 people that were housed by our system, maybe 13 to 16 have become newly homeless. And so those have been the numbers over the last 3 years. And we've seen increases obviously each year at the point in time count. And so again, with the senior population, being one of the growing populations among that. In the recent months, like in the fall to now, we're seeing that gap closing a little bit. So it's even in 1 month we saw where the number of housed outpaced those that are becoming homeless. And so that for us, it's encouraging. It's meaning that there's been a lot of different services that have been stood up over the last few years, including within the county as well as cities and other entities. And so we're seeing some of those effects take place and catch up. We hope that our 2025 numbers will be better, at least that we won't see increases. So that's still to be determined, but I am cautiously optimistic and hoping for better results this year.
And can we talk a little bit about accessibility of the program, which I know can be sometimes be a challenge for people who may not be familiar with filling out online applications, who may not have access to the internet, and who may not have the mobility to get to an office?
You're absolutely right on that. And so our process for enrollment was a lengthy one. And so this program was approved by the board, by our Board of Supervisors in 2022, but it took us a while to get everyone enrolled because we wanted to allow plenty of time because of these exact challenges that you just described. We had a contractor as well as a whole unit of folks, county staff, that really tried to make this as easy as possible. So one of the things is we made the application super easy, like a one page, and it could be written, it could be completed online, it could be, some of our staff went to the person's home and filled it out, with them together, that type of stuff. So we try to make the process as easy as possible and kind of meet the person and the household where they're at, in many cases. So it was just a combination of things. So definitely challenging. And then we tried to, again, make the documentation that needed to be provided, supporting documentation, again, very streamlined and as easy as possible. So just very, whatever basic things, for example, like income verification, or just kind of we accepted different things, and just really tried to be creative so we can still, make sure that the person met criteria, but just make it as easy as possible for them and not have like a super bureaucratic formal process.
All right. Well, the shallow rental subsidy program is no longer accepting applications right now, but is the hope to use it as a model for future programs? I mean, any plans you can tell me about there?
We certainly hope so. And so, as I mentioned, there will be a formal evaluation done, and that will give us later data on the outcomes and success. But even anecdotally now, we do see that it is working. We don't have people in the program currently that have fallen into homelessness. There's been some exits into perhaps a person that had to move in with family and maybe no longer eligible because they're not in their own home anymore, or they went into assisted living or another subsidized housing, which is a great outcome actually if they can get into something that's more permanently subsidized. So there, we've had some of those exits. However, majority of the households, a great majority of the households, is still in the program, and luckily has not exited into homelessness. And then our team is working with them, as I mentioned, on those transitions once they start happening. Now, I will say there's some glimmers of hope, and the state recently released a notice of funding for what they called a guaranteed income for seniors. And so it would be a very similar program to ours. And so it is open for application right now. It's competitive. It will only be awarded to one entity. It could be a government entity or or a private entity to apply. So we're applying. We're hoping to get it. If we don't get it, we hope another entity that gets it can use our best practices and our lessons learned. So either way, we're supporting this and some of the larger efforts on that. And we have had other jurisdictions reach out to us frequently on this program. So we've had a lot of interest in it. It's an innovative program, so I think and there's not a lot out there as far as evidence based on it. So I think a lot of folks are looking at this little program to maybe be an example, for future.
Well, all of that sounds so very hopeful. I've been speaking with Deanna Beck. She's the director of the Office of Homeless Solutions for the County of San Diego. Deanna, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Up next, a local collaborative provides shared housing as a way for people to prevent experiencing homelessness.
We should be doing better about tapping into the existing housing that we have and figuring out how to maximize placements for folks.
More when KPBS Midday Edition returns. Welcome back to KPBS Midday Edition. I'm Jade Hindman. We continue our conversation about San Diego's unaffordable housing crisis. And in searching for solutions, we came across something called shared housing. That's when multiple people agree to live under the same roof, like a roommate situation. But finding a place to stay and roommates that are a good fit can be a real challenge. That's where the San Diego Shared Housing Collaborative comes in. Joining me now is Melissa Peterman. She's the executive director of the affordable housing nonprofit Townspeople, which runs the collaborative. Melissa, welcome to Midday.
Thank you so much.
Well, tell me, broadly speaking, what is shared housing? I mean, who is it a good fit for?
Yeah, it's a good fit for everyone. I think most of us live in shared housing because San Diego's so unaffordable. It's hard to afford to pay housing expenses on your own. And so especially for folks with limited incomes, it becomes really beneficial and sometimes the only way that housing becomes accessible. Everyone gets their own room with their own lease. They share common spaces. So, yeah, probably not unlike many of the SDSU students
Right.
who are walking around.
Well, in what ways does housing unaffordability limit options for single residents?
Yeah, most of San Diego's rental housing stock is multi-bedroom, and so there are very few, and when I say most, I mean like 80%. So there's very limited options for studios and one-bedrooms, and you're competing with folks who can pay market rate, and then we've got our folks who are extremely low to moderate income even, and they, on paper, when they're applying, property owners have the ability to select someone who makes 4 times the rent or whatnot. And so it's really challenging to compete in that market. And also, it's really challenging to even find the kind of housing that you want. Mm-hmm. And within the homeless assistance system, we have focused for so long on getting people into those studios and one-bedrooms that it is no wonder that people are, we're seeing increased numbers of homelessness and we're seeing people stay homeless longer because there isn't that kind of housing there for them. And it takes so long to build. So we should be doing better about tapping into the existing housing that we have and figuring out how to maximize placements for folks and of course keep it preferable for them. We want folks to feel comfortable where they live and for it to be a good choice for them. Yeah.
Well, okay, so say I wanted to apply for housing through the San Diego Shared Housing Collaborative. I mean, what would that process actually look like?
Yeah, so we've got a no wrong door, okay. Which maybe that's too broad, but so let's say you were listening to us talk about it right now, and afterwards you were like, what would I do? You could go to our website, sdsharedhousing.org, and submit an interest request. And someone from our team would reach out, ask you a few questions, make sure that you are really interested in shared housing. There's a lot of stigma out there around it, so we want to make sure that folks really are comfortable. Mm-hmm. And then we'll provide them with the link to the portal. We've got an online matching system, kind of like a roommate.com. It's meant for housemate seekers who are experiencing homelessness or imminently to experience homelessness. So there's some safeguards in there that we've created that just help folks feel like it's a safe space. And then we've got staff available to help sort of them to navigate the system. And we host in-person meetups so that if you found someone in the portal that you're like, yeah, our compatibility looks pretty good, I'd love to meet them in person. And we've got fun conversation cards that are all like built around like co-living situations. And once folks create a housemate group, then we help them to find housing in the private market.
That's great. How does one qualify for it, though?
Yeah, we have pretty low eligibility criteria. We use that term quite loosely. You have to be experiencing, one of the housemates at least, it has to be experiencing homelessness or imminently to experience homelessness. You have to be interested in shared housing. Again, like it feels weird to emphasize that, but we really want folks to know that it is their choice. Like no one's forcing them into any kind of housing situation. And then you have to have some way of paying for your portion of housing expenses. As of right now, the Shared Housing Collaborative, we don't have any subsidies to offer. We have some flexible funding so we can pay for security deposits, utility assistance, but we don't have long-term rental assistance. We're working on that, and hopefully we'll be able to offer that to some folks. But yeah, whether they have earned income or Social Security benefits or some other kind of resource to pay for their housing costs, those are the three main things.
All right. So it's not that anyone could make too much money to be in this program. Anyone who's interested could be in?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
So let's say we have someone experiencing homelessness who has a relative who's open to sharing. They're housed, right? And that person has, makes above AMI. If they're open to sharing a home with their homeless relative, we will help them find housing that meets both of their combined preferences. So, yeah, I mean, it's rare that we have a participant who is on the streets or is about to be homeless who has a really high income, but it's not impossible. Like San Diego's a really expensive place to live, and you could seemingly make like a good living and still be living paycheck to paycheck. So It is really about your housing situation, and are you open to shared housing? Can you pay for your portion?
Well, and I would imagine that the benefits go beyond just, making one's living arrangement more affordable. I would imagine that there's some, there's a benefit to having a community. Talk a bit about that.
You are so right. I think a lot of times of course, economics contributes to how folks become homeless, but it's also a loss of relationships. And when you're living out on the streets, it can be really isolating. And then moving into a studio or one bedroom and you don't have anyone else around you can feel like a continuation of the loneliness that you had just left. So when you move into shared housing and you've got a housemate or housemates, we give all of the housemate groups fun tools like books on like games that you can play, ways that you can get to know each other and build that sense of camaraderie. And, everyone's different. Sometimes folks are like, I don't want to be your friend, but I do appreciate that you're there if I haven't come out of my room for a couple days, that you're like, are you okay?
Right. Well, that brings me to my next question because, most of us know what it's like to live with a bad housemate, actually.
Yes.
So what happens if the tenants you place together are simply just not a good match?
We've actually had that happen a couple of times. And because we have team members who are, regularly checking in with housemates and getting a feel for how the placement's going, we can intervene before anything blows up. And we relocate folks. So actually one of our most recent success stories is a father and his young daughter. They had we started working with them. They moved into a shared housing, one shared housing situation, and it just wasn't working out. So we were able to relocate them. We had another person who was looking for a housemate, and so they moved in together, and that was meant to be sort of temporary, and that so that they could look for a new housemate. And so this father and daughter, the father found another single dad up in Vista, and so now they just moved into a 2-bedroom apartment, and it's just really cool. So you've got 2 dads who, having similar life experiences in relation to like raising a child by themselves. And now they've got each other to support. But I think because we have a flexible pool of funding that we're able, and we're building networks throughout the region, we can move folks if something's not working out. And it just so happened in that situation that we had homes available. But if there have been cases where we put someone in a motel for a couple nights so we could find them a housemate. So that's definitely part of how, but the goal is to not make anyone homeless again, right? And that's part of why we really work hard to get individual leases for each housemate so that their tenancies aren't contingent on someone else. So if their housemate moves out, but their lease isn't over, they can stay, and then we work to help find a new housemate for them.
And is your organization covering that lost rent?
Yeah.
In the meantime?
Yeah. That's
great.
part of what we have with the Flex Fund that we can do. And then we also work with other agencies who are providing similar services. So the San Diego Housing Commission has a great program called LEAP. And so they, if our housemates are eligible for that resource, we'll tap into that first so that we can really reserve our flex funds for the folks who don't qualify for any of the other existing support systems out there, trying to get as creative as possible.
Yeah. Well, something that hit me that you said earlier is that, you had this father with a child. And so given that there are children involved in this process, how well are housemates vetted?
Yeah. So that is the question of like every week for us. We weren't necessarily expecting so many families with children to be interested in shared housing. And that was, we should have just kind of given, the environment and what we see. So we've been talking with providers who focus on support to families with children to try to map out a system that is more tailored to families. In the meantime, we don't want to turn anyone away. If they are telling us, like, I think this can work for me, we're more involved a little bit more in coaching them through the housemate selection process.
So what's the background check process look like?
So we don't run background checks. So the housemate selection is completely on the individuals. We provide a mechanism for them to identify folks whom they might be compatible with, but it's up to them to vet, and so we will through the Flex Fund, if asked, like we can pay to background check folks if that would be helpful. But we really encourage the housemates to have real conversations with one another, especially when there are kids involved prior to move-in. And our check-ins are a little bit more regular or more frequent when there are children. But we're trying to keep this system as low barrier to entry as possible.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, is the long-term goal to help people become self-sufficient and live independently, or is this collaborative way of living really the perfect situation for some people and a way of life that works for them?
Yeah, I love that question. And I hate the answer I'm going to give you because it's a little bit of both. I think there are some folks who totally see this as a way to get back on their feet, save money, increase their income, and then find a studio or a 1-bedroom where they can live by themselves. And then there are some folks where, like, this is really going to be this is the life that the house life they want. They want to be surrounded by people, and it might not be this person forever, but they're they like being around others. So we're still so new into the collaborative that we don't have any sort of like solid scientific like data that we can pull from that would say like what most people are doing. But we are soon to at least have 1 year's worth of data that we can begin to analyze more deeply. But the goal is definitely to continue this for as long as people are experiencing homelessness and rents are unaffordable.
Sure. I mean, like, the housing problem is a really big one. Homelessness is a really big issue. How do you think that your program meets the need for housing in San Diego? You have some people who aren't bringing in an income at all, and then you have some people who are working 3 jobs and yet still can't afford a home.
Yeah.
Where does your organization fit into all of that?
Where we fit in is our goal is for everyone in San Diego to have a home. And so however we can fill those gaps, and I think because townspeople were a small organization, we can be more nimble than some of the bigger agencies are able to do, and so we can fill in the niches and the gaps. So something like shared housing is perfectly aligned with what we are all about, and we can be really adaptive to changes in demographics, to changes in circumstance. And I think that is really important. As you said, we're looking at this 2-pronged crisis of affordable housing and homelessness. You need all hands on deck, even the little guys like us.
All right. Well, I've been speaking with Melissa Peterman. She's the executive director of the affordable housing nonprofit Townspeople, which runs the San Diego Shared Housing Collaborative. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was so great.